Hello, and welcome to Life Matters, the program where we engage life issues with critical thinking and a biblical worldview. Here is our host, Tony Clark, Executive Director of Assure Women's Center in Omaha, Nebraska.
Welcome to Life Matters. Today, we're honored to have Frank Pavone, one of the most prominent pro-life leaders in the world. As National Director of Priests for Life, he has dedicated his life and ministry to ending abortion. Over the years, he has advised U.S. presidents, addressed Congress, worked closely with the Vatican, and been at the forefront of the fight for life in both political and pastoral spheres. His unwavering commitment has earned him numerous honors, including the Proudly Pro-Life Award by the National Right to Life Committee and several honorary doctorates. Father Frank, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you.
I'm so happy you're here. Thank you so much for joining me. To start, what first ignited your passion for pro-life advocacy?
I was a teenager in a public school, and I got an opportunity to go to the March for Life in Washington. Now, I had not had any real involvement in any way with abortion or even paid much attention to the issue. But I was open to going to the March for Life when I was invited, and that really ignited my interest in the whole issue and in the pro-life movement, because I saw this vast crowd on a bitter cold day, very, very serious in what they were addressing, and yet so joyful and so full of prayer and faith and confidence. Just the whole thing impressed me, and the variety of the crowd, politically, religiously, ethnically, age groups, and so forth. And from that point on, I just started paying more attention to abortion. And it was abortion itself that ignited me, in the sense that when we look at what it is and face honestly the violence of abortion, alarms start going off in our mind. And that alarm in my mind just got louder and louder.
I think that's sometimes something that we overlook, the horrible images of abortion. And I often tell people, I feel like people that are for abortion have not watched one. They've not seen one. They've not witnessed one. Because how can you and still not be pro-life? But
well, I've often said we have a pretend debate on abortion going on in this country, because people are talking past each other. We say the word and we're thinking about the killing of a baby. They say the word and they're thinking about freedom and choice and women's health. We've got nothing against freedom, choice, and women's health. We got something against killing babies. So that's why we've set up a website, lookatabortion.org. And I want to invite people to use that. Use that as a tool. Somebody thinks they have an opinion on this. Ask them, have you ever seen one?
That's good. That's very good. That's very good. Excuse me. I understand that Mother Teresa personally invited you to India to speak on life issues. That must have been an amazing opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Can you share that experience with our listeners?
Yes. Well, I got to know Mother Teresa through Cardinal O'Connor, first of all, who ordained me and gave me permission to do Priests for Life. And it was towards the end of her life. I knew her like the last 3 to 4 years of her life. I got to meet her in 1994. I had met her briefly prior to that, but to get to know her. So we had invited her to a Priests for Life event, and she couldn't come in person, but she did come by phone hookup. So in the course of setting that up, we arranged to visit her in Calcutta. I went over there with one of my staff, and I was just so privileged to be able to, have meals with her. And she took me on tours of her Calcutta-based houses and her community of sisters. She had me talk to the sisters about abortion. She had me. She called the Archbishop right there and then in front of me. I saw how effective Mother Teresa could be. She was basically ordering the Archbishop. You got to have Father Frank come out here and talk to the clergy. But she, the most treasured thing about the whole experience was the time we were able to sit and talk just one-on-one about pro-life strategy, about Priests for Life, about the ministry that I had just at that time started to lead. And I shared with her my passion and the way that I was approaching the issue. And really, she was so genuinely interested in what we were doing. And part of it was because, this is Cardinal O'Connor's priest and he's my friend, so she wanted to, that was part of her motivation there in welcoming me. But she really did get excited about our mission. She wrote a beautiful letter of support for Priests for Life. And you know what was so beautiful? I mean, we just saw President Trump pardon pro-life activists that had been unjustly imprisoned or convicted. Some of them were not in jail, but they were nevertheless under the thumb of the Justice Department. And a lot of this was because of the FACE law that President Clinton had signed, freedom of access to clinic entrances. So I visited Mother Teresa in Calcutta just literally 1 month after Clinton had signed that bill into law. I explained to her about that law. And I said, people are going peacefully to intervene to stop abortions and they're being, arrested and thrown in jail, federal crimes. You know what she said? She said, if we had that law in India, I would have been thrown in jail many times.
Wow.
She said, because I go to the abortion places here, I take the women by the arm and I pull them away. So you can imagine little Mother Teresa pulling women away from abortion because she said, we'll help you. We'll help you and your baby. So many, many moments like that with her. It was a privilege to know her close and in person. Those are just, the Lord allows us to cross paths with people because he knows what we need and how much of it we need. And she has certainly been an inspiration for the work I continue to do.
Absolutely. I'm sure that's one of the high points of your life and your career, and it would certainly be one of mine. So
Yes.
we, we need more powerful, tiny, mighty women like that.
That's right.
Good. So you've been at the forefront of many pivotal discussions and news stories related to the sanctity of life. One story that captured the hearts and minds of so many of us in the pro-life movement was Terri Schiavo's life. I remember that, I was in the military. I remember just hearing the stories about it, the news stories about it. For many listeners who may not be familiar with Terri's case, she was a young woman who suffered brain damage in 1990 and was dependent on a feeding tube for nourishment. So there was a legal battle between her and her husband and her parents. Her husband wanted to remove the feeding tube. Her parents did not. Despite advocacy from the pro-life and disability rights communities, the courts ruled to remove her feeding tube. And she passed away in 2005 from dehydration. Father Frank, where you were at Terri's bedside in her final days, or a strong advocate for her life, what do you want people to remember about her case?
That first of all, she wasn't sick. She was injured, but not sick. So she wasn't a dying person. If someone is dying of some terminal disease, some form of cancer, for example, there's a certain point at which you say, okay, further treatment is not going to help, right? And the church is perfectly okay and has acknowledged that morally there is a point at which you can stop providing treatments that aren't going to do any good. But Terri was not that. Terri did not have any terminal illness. She was healthy, and with rehabilitation and with therapy, which she was also denied, she could have gotten better. She was ultimately denied food and water, but she was also denied the basics of, being able to go out and enjoy the fresh air, the sunshine. Yeah. It was a terrible example of judging a person's life to be worthless and then treating them that way. But like you said, her mom, her brother, her sister, her dad, they all wanted to take care of her. Now, her husband had become estranged from her. He was already off with another woman, starting a different life with her. And it's like her family said, just go. If you don't want anything to do with us anymore, just leave. We'll take care of Terri. But please stop insisting before the law that she has to be killed. And yet that's what ended up happening. What I want people to remember was that with the love of that family, the fact that Terri was not hooked up to machines and dying of some disease, and the fact that she was responsive. The media, people need to learn. One of the key lessons from the Terri Schiavo tragedy is how different the real situations are with these people than what the media portrays. I was one of only a handful of people who were allowed to go into her room. Now, when we say allowed, the court that was, again, mediating this dispute between Terri's parents and siblings and versus her estranged husband, at a certain point created a list and said only these people can go into her room. And there were armed police officers at the door enforcing that list. I was able to see that what the media was saying was a bunch of lies. They were saying, oh, she's unresponsive. She's just lying there like a vegetable, you know. She was responsive. She laughed at her father's jokes. She followed me around the room with her eyes. When I started praying over her, she would close her eyes. When I said amen, she would open her eyes. I mean, to any normal, common sense human being, she was responding to her environment. So these are some of the things we have to keep in mind. And the thing people remember most when I tell the stories about Terri is when I point out that there she was in those final 2 weeks. She was literally killed by dehydration. We were not allowed to give her a drop of water.
Wow.
And yet, inches away from her parched lips was a vase of flowers filled with water.
My goodness.
I mean, what is that? We're nourishing the flowers.
Mhm.
And
Long saluted.
we're killing this woman and can't give her a drop of water. That's the culture of death. That's the absurdity of the
Yeah.
culture of death.
Yeah. What lessons do you think Terry's life and death teach us about the broader threats to life beyond abortion?
What they teach us is very simply this. Unless the babies in the womb are protected, we are all in danger. The sanctity of life is a principle that you don't break at one point but keep intact at another. When you break it at any point, you break it for everybody. And what is that principle? You can never authorize the killing of the innocent. Now, killing in self-defense, in war, and there's certain circumstances where the taking of life is not technically murder or immoral. But those are few, limited, well-defined circumstances. For an innocent person, government does not have the authority to permit the taking of those lives. And this is what it teaches us that, Terri, I often said during the course of this whole tragedy, Terri Schiavo died because of one reason, that tens of millions of unborn babies died before her. Because it's the same thing. It's the law protecting choice over life. You can't project choice over life. You can't say it's okay to kill this person just because I choose to kill them. That is never acceptable in a civilized society. And that's the lesson we have to take away from the Terri Schiavo case.
I don't know that I've ever heard it quite put that way, but that makes a lot of sense. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Life Matters is the program where we engage life issues with critical thinking and a biblical worldview, and it is a ministry of Assure Women's Center. Assure Women's Center is a nationally recognized pro-life pregnancy center based in Omaha, Nebraska. Did you know that you can connect with Life Matters online? You can find all of our previous episodes to review for yourself or share with the people in your life by visiting firststeptolife.com/Life Matters, or on Facebook at First Step to Life Omaha. Sharing our episodes and encouraging us with a positive comment is a completely free way that you can help us get the pro-life message out to more people.
When it comes to abortion, the common narrative from those who are pro-abortion is that abortion is about empowerment. Can you unpack how abortion actually harms women rather than helps them?
A woman lying on a table with her feet in stirrups, crying because she doesn't want to do it, being told to shut up, and then an abortionist that she's never met or talked to and whose name she couldn't even pronounce or know, comes to her and says, don't worry, this will be over in just a few minutes, and then sucks the baby out of her. And then she's crying again because she realizes she just did the worst thing in her life. And then she lives with decades of pain and grief. That's not empowerment. That has nothing to do with being in power or in control. It's exactly the opposite. People don't get abortions because of power. They don't get abortions because of freedom of choice. The reality is, and before we make any moral or philosophical arguments against abortion, you just have to look at the facts of what's happening. They're not going to these clinics because of freedom of choice. They're going because they feel they have no freedom and no choice. My friend and associate, Dr. David Reardon, has recently published a new research showing that the percentage of women that get abortions but do not want to, they just feel pressured by circumstances or sometimes by people who are actually coercing them, is 60%.
Yeah.
So if the people want to talk about women's empowerment, what I would say to them is this: does empowerment just work one way? Do you just want to empower women to end their pregnancies? Or do you want to empower them, if this is what they choose, to continue their pregnancies? The pro life movement is more about power and choice and freedom than the pro abortion movement is. And what
Absolutely.
we are seeing all over the place is that this is just a sad exploitation of women. And it's the farthest thing from empowerment that you can imagine.
Mhm. You know, you kind of talked about or described a woman about to have an abortion, and some people might think that's pretty harsh, but I think it goes back to I think when we think about abortion, most of us have not actually looked at what an abortion looks like or how it actually happens. So I like the fact that you mentioned, is it lookatabortions.com? Is that
Look at abortion.com or .org. They both work.
okay? I think that's so important that people actually come to realization what abortion actually is. I know people in the pro life movement do, but there's so many that don't, and that's just ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. Let's agree what it is that we're talking about in the first place. I mean,
Right.
that's a very, very sensible starting point for any conversation or debate.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. So, as a national pastoral director of Rachel's Vineyard, a healing ministry for women who have had abortions, what are some of the most common emotional and spiritual wounds experienced by those who have had abortions?
A lack of trust in themselves.
Yeah.
There's a fearful sense that, hey, I don't know who I am anymore, because they realize what they just did was to cross a line that they would never imagine anyone should cross, that they had their own child killed. I mean, that provokes a lot of things. It provokes a distrust in oneself. It provokes a distrust and anger towards others who may have deceived them into getting that abortion, or who perhaps just failed to step up to the plate to help them. It invokes a lack of trust in God and a fear of God's punishment, a deep sense of unworthiness. The self-esteem just disintegrates, and then that interferes with future relationships. It even interferes with sexual intimacy. It interferes with parenting going forward. They have difficulty bonding with future children, or they may become overprotective of children that they do bring to birth later on. Because what's working there in the background is that guilt. I'm going to be punished for killing my first child, so I better be extra protective of this one because something bad is going to happen to me. All these are just some of the many. These are more relational, psychological things that I just mentioned. Then there are simply the physical problems that result from abortion: infertility, infection, um, uh, 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 difficulty because the cervix can be damaged, the cervical muscle can be weakened, and this can lead to a higher incidence of preterm labor in subsequent pregnancies. These are just some of the many, many effects. Again, we have libraries of research. We have bibliographies, this high, just bibliography, just a little paragraph about each of these studies. And if people want to see some of these studies, you want to see, well, what is this? Are we just saying this because we don't like abortion, or is there actual research? You can find the actual research. Let me give you another website: lifeafterabortion.com. And lifeafterabortion.com is a website that will give you links to a lot of this different research. And I invite people to look at it for themselves.
Good. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of what you just described play out in friends and family that perhaps that have had abortions that I know personally. And I think at Assure, one of the things that we see more often is that, before with the abortion pill, not that young lady is actually taking the pill herself. And where before she may have been able to put that abortion off on someone else, this is something that I've done to myself. And it takes it's a harder um, emotional, I don't know, like know what word to even use, guilt. Maybe that's the word. Because now I've done this to myself. I can't put this off on someone else. This is something that I did to myself. And so we're seeing that as well. And I just want people to know if you or someone has had an abortion, there is healing. You can contact Assure. The Rachel's Vineyard is once again another healing ministry that is available for women who have had abortions. But we just want people to know that there's healing, there's forgiveness, and there's grace
That's right.
for perhaps an abortion that they have had in the past.
And no matter where someone lives, there's a website, Abortion Forgiveness.
Yes.
And abortionforgiveness.com, you put your zip code in and you'll find some of the nearby healing ministries. In fact, just before we came together to have this conversation, I was on a regular conference call of national leaders in the area of abortion healing, like 24 different ministries represented on the call. We get together regularly, lots of help available. And sadly, it's because so many people need that help.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, how can Christians respond to women, both those who are currently facing unexpected pregnancies and those who have already had abortions, with both truth and compassion? We've talked about it a little bit, but what else can we do?
Yeah. Well, keep in mind there are 4 simple words that describe our approach, and they're the words that God says to us: "I am with you." We're not pointing fingers of condemnation; we're extending hands of mercy, just like God does to us. I am with you. And so getting the word out in every possible way that we who reject abortion do not reject those who have had abortions, nor do we reject those who think they have to have an abortion. And we just have to say that. We have to say that. Preachers, we train clergy how to preach on this issue. We tell them, start with that. Let people know that. We are with you. Compassion. We're not rejecting. We're not judging. We want to help you. If we say that and we say that sincerely, that gets through to people. Put it on social media, put it out in opinion pieces, put it out in sermons, any and every way, and then know the resources that are available. I mentioned abortionforgiveness.com. That's obviously for after abortion, but pregnancycenters.org is for beforehand. And again, it's the same thing. You go there, you put your zip code, you'll find the nearest pregnancy centers. Fortunately, there are 4 times as many pregnancy centers as there are abortion clinics. So the help is there. And by providing that help and speaking about it, that's how we get that message across.
Absolutely. Their help is available. My listeners mostly probably in Nebraska. Sure is one of those centers, but there are centers from east to west, north to south in Nebraska. So there's help available, and we want women to know that they are not alone. They're not alone.
And by the way, and I have had just so many beautiful experiences in Nebraska over the years of doing this work. And I was out there helping, to fight against that abortion amendment last year and to pass the pro-life amendment. So congratulations to Nebraska. It was one of the few places where there was victory over those in those things.
Yes, thank you. Nebraska is a pro-life state. I think I got a question for you about that. Let's hold that thought for a minute. So as we kind of transition to political issues, some argue that abortion is a political issue rather than a moral one. How do you respond to Christians who believe the church should stay out of politics when it comes to life issues?
Well, the church is concerned about human life.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Christianity is all about God becoming human and joining us to himself.
Mm-hmm.
And politics has responsibility to human life as well. The first duty of the political community is to protect human life and human rights.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the intersection is. It's not that we don't want the church to become a political party. There's a difference between pastors and politicians. There's obviously a distinction between what the church does and what the state does. The state doesn't perform the sacraments and the church doesn't deploy armies, so there's an obvious difference. But when you think about it from the perspective of protecting vulnerable human life, both the church and the state have serious responsibilities towards that. And so let's use an example. Let's say, and it's not a bizarre example, by the way, it has come up in human history. Let's say that a religion believed that in order to please God, they had to sacrifice a baby, kill a baby. And so could the state come in and say to that church, we are not going to allow you to kill babies over there in the sanctuary or on the altar? Of course. I don't think there's a saint who would say there shouldn't be a law against that.
Right.
Now,
right.
Should the church then object to, separation of church and state? You can't. No, the state has a duty towards those human lives. So the church, too, has a duty towards human life. And if it's the state that's permitting the killing, Why doesn't the church have the duty then to speak up and to say, no, your laws, your policies must protect those human lives? So we're addressing it, obviously, from a moral perspective, but this is why, yes, there is a political aspect to abortion.
Yeah.
The political aspect of it doesn't exhaust the meaning of it, because it's a religious subject, it's a moral topic, it's a human rights issue. But there is a political dimension, and again, it's because politics exists for human life.
Good, and that's why it's important for us as Christians to be involved in politics. So we should run for school boards and
Yes.
council persons, senators, and it's so important that we are active in that so that we can be salt and light in that dark community.
The Lord sends us into the world,
Yeah.
right, to transform.
Absolutely, absolutely. In one of your talks that is available on Priest for Life website, Challenging Government Leaders to Defend Life, you emphasize the importance of holding politicians accountable on life issues. What strategies have you found most effective in engaging those government leaders, both those who claim to be pro-life and those who perhaps might oppose the movement?
Communicate with your leaders. How many people who are listening, for example, we could just do a little examination of conscience. How many of us know who our representative is in the state legislature?
Yeah.
How many of us know who our governor is, and how about our 2 U.S. senators or our representative in the U.S. House? First of all, do we know these people? Do we know where they stand on the issues? Do they know where we stand on the issues? Have we communicated with them? Have we tried to visit their offices? And we don't mean you have to necessarily go to Washington. Visit them in their local offices near where you live. That's number one. And number two, when you do communicate with them, look for in-person communication and or telephone communication.
Please join us next week for part 2 of our interview with Frank Pavone.
We want to thank you for joining us on Life Matters this week. Life Matters is an educational outreach resource of Assure Women's Center in Omaha, Nebraska. To learn more about the ministry of Assure, visit firststeptolife.com. That's firststeptolife.com. Thanks for listening to Life Matters. Join us again next week at the same time right here on BOT Radio Network.